Kris.
What's going on, everybody? How y'all doing?
Good.
Can you hear me okay,
Hello.
Christina?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, awesome. I just real quick, Christina, I made you a host, just in case my internet goes out because I've been having some flaky internet. So,
Okay.
but to everyone else who's joining us today, thank you for joining us. I know we were had to push back this call from last Wednesday to this Wednesday, so I appreciate you guys making that accommodation for those that can join, and apologize for those that we had to reschedule on. So hope everyone's having a great week. For those that have not been a part of our Adult Day Pro webinar before, just a few housekeeping items. I always encourage everyone to put any questions that you might have in the chat. Because as we roll into our live Q&A, we have Christina, fellow Adult Day expert on the call here. But as we roll into this live Q&A today, it's we're going to go in order of those who have submitted or put their questions into the chat. So I just always encourage everyone to take a moment now while we have this kind of 10-minute buffer to put those questions in there. Anything you have, from if you're in the startup stage, if you're trying to decide if you even want to do this, if you're have questions on how much does it cost, or licensing questions that you might have, if you have if you're already open and you are in the early stages and trying to figure out how to grow your census and get the word out there. If you're dealing with any sort of operational struggles or staffing issues, definitely make sure you put that information in the chat, and we'll dive into those things together. So before we get started with live Q&A, I always love to do a few introductions. Typically we'll have time for 3 to 5 people, just to say your name, where you're from, and then what stage of the journey that you're in. So in this particular section, just want to make sure that we don't dive into the Q&A quite yet. Our goal is to just kind of build a community, and sometimes people on this call might be from similar areas, and it's always good if you can meet someone that you can call on that is in your state and that might be going through some of the similar struggles that you're going through. So that being said, whoever wants to introduce themselves first, say hi, your name, where you're from, and what stage of this journey you're in, and then we'll jump into Q&A here shortly. I always feel like it's crickets in the beginning.
Hello.
Everyone's gotta get comfortable.
Hi.
Hello.
Yes, my name is Nancy. I'm from Massachusetts. I was in the last call. I think before the last one, before we scheduled that one. And then I talk about, you gave me some advice about what I should do. Like I need another NPI. I cannot use the NPI I have for my NP. And then I did all that. And then also I try to see if I can um register for myself, things like that. I tried. um I did my.
And Nancy, you want to it sounds like you might be leading me into a question here. You want to throw it in the chat so we can get touch base with you about that particular question that you're going through?
Oh yeah, but it's
Or-
not really a question, but I wanted to know. I didn't know that I should not fill out the myself application before I get my license, my ADH license, my adult daycare license. So
Gotcha.
I don't know if you have any advice about that.
Yeah. Throw that in the chat. Sounds like a question to me. We'll dive into it. So for those that don't know, Nancy, you said you're from Massachusetts, right?
Yes.
All right. So Nancy's from Massachusetts. She's in that early startup stage, going through the licensing process. So Nancy, welcome to the call. Definitely put your question in the chat. We'll get to it here in about 5 to 10 minutes.
Okay.
Anyone else? Anyone else want to
Hi.
introduce themselves?
Hi, this is Claudia. I'm in Florida.
Hi,
And
Claudia.
hi, how you doing? I'm a big fan of you. I'm in the area in North Tampa. and we did secure a building, but we're working with the county. And so I'm looking forward hearing more of your feedback. Thank you.
Well, Claudia, you are in a critical stage, so I'm sure you have questions. Definitely, throw some questions in the chat, because you're in a critical stage that, when people get to it, it's very important, because now you have hard costs, right? Like if you have a building, if you got a lease, like time is ticking, and every day that you're not open costs money. So what you're going through is very helpful for others to learn from. So definitely throw your information in the chat as well. Any specific questions about this stage that you're in, because it can be super helpful for a lot of people on this call.
Okay. I'm Anita.
Hi, Anita. How are you?
Fine, thanks. I'm in Florida, in North Tampa as well. So this is really good. I might be able to.
Look at that. You got some friends. Claudia, Eric, Anita, or is it, you said this is Anita?
Yes, Eric and Anita.
Okay.
Yes, we are just in the beginning stages. We're trying to decide what to do. So this is our first meeting, and we're very excited. We want to find out a lot about this and to see whether it's something that we want to go through with. We used to do ADT as part of our facility, an ALF that we had, but we sold and we haven't done it in many years.
Awesome. Well, Anita, sounds like you're in an interesting stage, and I know we definitely have some Florida, a lot of experience in Florida. So, if you have any specific burning questions, put them in the chat. I only got one question so far. So I know Nancy has a question. I know Claudia has a question. Anita, I'm sure you have a question. So I don't see them in the chat, so make sure you add them to the chat there, guys. We're gonna get started here in just a few minutes. We'll do 2 more introductions.
I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Nicole. I'm in New York. Kris, I was in Syracuse 2 weeks ago. But every time I tried to talk to you, someone was like, had your attention, and I felt bad, like just ripping you away. So I'm sad we didn't get to talk, but I'm glad I'm on this webinar.
Absolutely. I knew you look familiar. Well, do you currently have or run an adult day center?
I don't. So
Okay.
I'm working on like marketing, looking for a space, getting a small business loan, all at the same time.
All that stuff. Yeah.
So
Well,
really excited to.
Well, so real quick, so in New York, were you there kind of learning and just trying to be around others, or had you joined the association yet? Or
I have, yeah.
Okay, fantastic, awesome.
Yeah, so I'm from Lower New York, so I'm like a half an hour north of the city.
Okay.
So me and my sister drove up the 4 hours to Syracuse.
Love it. No, well, definitely. I'm sure in that stage, there's got to be a ton of questions that you're kind of trying to mull through. So, absolutely, your questions will be very helpful for a lot of people on this call. So feel free to, any burning things that you're trying to figure out. Hey, next steps, or how do I do this? Like, throw them in the chat, and we'll get to it on this call. So,
thank you.
All right, Nicole. Thanks for being here. So glad we could.
Thanks for having this call. This is amazing. Thank you.
We'll go through one more person.
Okay, I would like to speak. Hi.
Hello. Hi, how are you?
My name is Taria. I'm calling from I'm from Delaware, and I bought a ADC that went down.
Okay.
So I had the building.
Yep.
I actually was the director of the program, the director of operations, and I was just trying to. I love your videos, and I was just trying to get to, trying to get some more information that the owner did not share with me. So I went through the process with the state 3 times. So I got a little, more knowledge about what needs to be done. But he didn't tell me everything. So those are still questions.
So did you, when you say you bought the business from, so like essentially, do you have a current building? Oh, you bought the building?
Yes.
Okay. Got it. So are you licensed currently, or are you kind of going back through the licensing process?
So I'm going back through the licensing process off of the deficiency list that they left us.
Okay. So definitely, let's, do you have any specific questions Taria, that you can put into the chat here real quick? Because it seems like you have kind of an interesting case study that we could certainly talk about. Because I would imagine with having gone through this where there was a closure and then now buying the building and then kind of going back into it again, there's probably a lot of like, hey, what can I do to ensure success out the gate? And I know a lot of times a lot of closures were due to COVID and the post-COVID issues that arose. But if you're approaching this again, like would love to support you as you go into this journey, so you can think about all those variables that might be something to consider, so you don't have roadblocks and you can open and be successful and turn it around.
Yes. Okay.
Awesome. All right. Well, we'll definitely throw some stuff in the chat. Would love to. Would love to connect more and learn more about your situation. Seems very interesting. We got some intriguing ones. We got people that are in some intriguing stages. So love to go ahead and get into the Q&A now. The chat's filling up. So I'm gonna give everyone a last warning. If you haven't already, make sure you put your questions in the chat so we can get to them. We only have about an hour to get through all these questions, so we'll try to do our best to get through as many as possible. So first come, first serve. Christina, you want to introduce yourself and kind of share a little background on what you do, and thank you for being here too.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Kris. It's always fun to do these with you. My name is Christina Velosage, and I own ADS Consult. I'm located in Northeast Ohio, and I am a consultant for adult days all over the country. So I've helped many startups in many, many different states. And I kind of help Kris with some of the questions. Maybe if you have some state-specific questions that I've worked in, I might be able to give you some more insight. So if you put a question in the chat, if you just want to include your state, sometimes we get a lot of questions, and I'll try to jump ahead and answer some of those for Kris so that your questions are answered. So I just appreciate if you do that. But thanks, everyone. I'm looking forward to it.
And I've known Christina for a while. She's we've worked together on some different projects. She does a great job, very knowledgeable, and definitely has a much broader understanding of the adult day licensing, and adult day kind of just even from the Medicaid lens and from state to state. She's worked with a lot of different adult day centers across the U.S. So she brings a really unique perspective. So if you're in Florida, I definitely have a lot of intel there. General adult day operations, happy to help when it comes to state specific things and Medicaid reimbursement and the broader alternative adult day options that are maybe not so much private pay focused. Christina brings a ton of value. So super grateful to have her here and her insight. And I think we can jump into the Q&A. I don't know your first name, but it says C. Johnson. Is C. Johnson on the call?
Yes, I am.
Hi, how are you? And what's your first name?
Carmen.
Carmen, nice to meet you. Thank you for joining us.
Yes. Oh, what do you? Well,
go ahead. Yeah, go ahead and share your question just so everyone else can hear, and then we'll dive into it. We'll try to give everyone about 5 to 7 minutes per question.
Oh, okay. So, do you want me to say the question?
Yep. Yeah. Go ahead and share it so everyone on the Zoom can hear. Yep.
Oh, I thought everyone heard it, but I was just asking, what is the best setup? Is it non-for-profit or profit? What do you suggest?
Sure. I'll share my perspective. I think it really depends on your like intention for your what do you want to do with your adult day center. So like for instance, if you are planning, if you want to like work with a team of people and have a board, and some of your efforts might go towards fundraising, you might be able to do unique things with the fundraising aspect of what you're doing, because you might be able to raise funds that you may not otherwise have to give back to your members, to give back to your family caregivers. So the nonprofit side has certainly unique advantages. But I typically, if a nonprofit is put together very well, there's going to be a board. There's going to be more people that are going to be maybe have influence over the direction of the organization. So you would want to maybe just make sure you pick the right people to be on that board and to at the end of the day, like, you're still going to have a lot of shots to call, but you might have a little bit more resistance in making decisions depending on the type of board that you have, whether that's running ideas past them or getting approvals for certain projects, or maybe you get a grant and it has to be spent on certain things, and there might be certain processes and put in place to maybe help direct how funds are spent or what decisions are made. But it certainly has its advantages too, because of the fundraising aspect of it. Whereas maybe on the for-profit side, you may not have anyone to answer to. If you don't have a partner and it's just you, you might have free reign to spend the money that you're using for your adult day center however you wish, to take on any projects or any ideas that you feel are important to you. But that would be my take on it. So I think it's much more of a personal decision of like, what direction do I want to take my adult day center? But Christina, would love to get your perspective, especially since I'm sure worked with both for-profit and nonprofit.
Yeah, so I usually tell people, when you're a for-profit, like, so you're the captain of the ship, right? And like Kris said, you can make those decisions. You want to give somebody a raise, you give them a raise. If you want to buy a new vehicle, you make that decision. If you have a partner, you make it together. With a board, a lot of those things have to be approved by your board. And depending on how you set that up, of how it needs to be approved by a vote, what the dollar amount is, that type of thing. But, Kris did bring up a great point about grants. So, a lot of grants are available to nonprofits that are not always available to for-profits. And here in Northeast Ohio, we had some grant availability, even in my county, and they, you had to be a nonprofit to apply for those dollars. Alzheimer's Association, again, they had some grant opportunities, but you had to be a nonprofit in order to get those. So it just depends on how you want to do that. With a nonprofit, you can set up a foundation. There's a lot more you can do with that. But it's a little bit, I always say it's a little more regulated. So there's, more people in charge of that ship, where, as a for-profit, you're in charge.
Have you noticed whether ADCs are more successful on the nonprofit side or the profit side?
So nationally,
can you speak to that?
Yeah, so nationally, nonprofits were the majority of adult days up into the last few years. And so now we're seeing more adult days become for-profits. And, so, it is changing. I would say it's almost 50-50 right now. So,
do you know, like, which side is more successful?
Again, with a nonprofit, you have access to different funding, like, United Way. One of our nonprofits in this area, they go to the food bank and get food bank, food from there for their center. So, those are things that they wouldn't be able to do as a for-profit. But, my business was a for-profit. If I did a new one, I would have to really think long and hard between which route I wanted to go. So, yeah, it's a matter of personal preference. You can meet with your accountant, because there's also different tax liabilities as well with a for-profit versus a nonprofit.
And another thing, one last quick little share is, and my internet just went out, so it's just coming back online. So if I freeze, Christina, feel free to just take it, take it forward. But I would say that when I think about the nonprofit space, a lot of times if you're in a state where Medicaid reimbursement might be low, like lower than what reimbursement really should be in order to operate an adult day center successfully. If that is the case, then considering the nonprofit status could be a way to help subsidize maybe those lower state reimbursement rates. So if you were intending, I always tell people there's like those four those four buckets of am I going to be am I going to be a nonprofit, for profit? Am I going to primarily focus on private pay or state funded programs? Am I going to focus on the senior population or the young adult population? And then am I going to go social or medical? And it's not to say that you have to be, you can't, if you're private pay, you're not accepting Medicaid. It's just what is like your primary focus in each of those categories. So my point is, if your payer source is primarily Medicaid and the reimbursement side of it is lower than, than really what it should be for you to operate your center successfully and actually have a healthy profit margin, then going nonprofit may make sense if you're going to go out to the market and be a primarily Medicaid funded center. If you're going to focus on the private pay marketplace and maybe what you're charging your consumer is at a higher price point, then the consideration for nonprofit status may not be, as desirable, because you may not need that offset to subsidize your income, so, those are things to take into consideration where, if, in Texas, right, state reimbursement is $38 for the day. I mean, $38 for the day. I mean, shoot, you can, in some restaurants, it's $38 for a dinner today, so to think that you're going to serve breakfast, lunch, afternoon snacks, entertain everyone, have a care team there helping assist people to the restrooms and care for those that might have dementia for $38 a day. Like, in that state, if you were focusing on the Medicaid population, you might have to be a nonprofit, and a lot of your center, your center may rely on those grants and raising, and fundraisers to help offset those costs. So those are definitely some things to consider. It's definitely personal preference, but it really depends on your objectives as to which direction would make more sense. But I think it's a great question, and I appreciate you sharing. I think that was super helpful for others too. Let's see. I think Sabrina, are you on? Sabrina. Let's see. I don't. Trying to see if she was still on or not.
Yes,
Okay.
I'm here.
Gotcha.
Hello, everyone. Hello. My question, I'm at work. I can't get light on. I'm at work. My question that I have, Kris, is do we need to have a water sprinkler system now for all the adult day centers in the state of Florida or overall? How will that work?
Yeah, that license, or from my understanding, and I'm sure maybe Christina has, because I know she recently worked for the center here in Florida, but from my understanding, it was a recent change that was made that you are required now to have a fire, like before you could get away, depending on the size of the space, with just a fire alarm system. And if you have a center already that exists, you might be grandfathered in. But if you're building a new center today and you're going through the initial licensing process, as part of the fire code, a fire sprinkler system will be required. Christina, am I? And I think that just recently changed. I want to say that changed it like.
Right, it just recently changed. I heard about it, but I wasn't for sure. Like, is it required? Like, you have to have it, or is I don't
No,
know.
I know it's.
You do.
Yeah, like my friend, she just opened up an elder well up in the like St. Pete, kind of Tampa area, and that was a surprise for them, because it changed, like from 2024 to 2025, and like they were just getting to the home stretch of getting open when the change took place, and they were, rudely confronted with this reality of having to put a sprinkler system in.
And I had a client as well in Florida, and they bought a building and had to retrofit it with a sprinkler system. And I can tell you they had waited for 3 months on one part for the sprinkler system. So that's 3 months of paying all their overhead expenses, waiting for one part to come in. So yeah, I always tell people, make sure if you need a sprinkler system before you buy or sign a lease.
Okay, with that note, okay, go ahead.
And one more thing, just like I just had someone I'm working with out in Texas. They like literally they bought the building, everything was good with zoning, hired architects going through phase 1 architectural drawings, had spent a ton, like an unbelievable amount of money on this project. And the fire marshal just came in and said that they need to have at least 40 parking spaces, which they do not. and it's thrown a massive curveball in his plan. And so it's just, so a lot of times, when you're thinking about either leasing a property or purchasing a property, it is so important to check with all the various entities that are going to have their hand in this decision. Like, it can be intimidating because you don't know where to go. But the reality of it is typically there's going to be a zoning component, a fire component, and then the licensing component. And all three of those people might have different takes on whether or not you can use your space for its approved, for this adult day of use. And it's important to make sure that that you have done enough due diligence to make sure that your space is appropriate for an adult day center, and there's no potential issues when it comes to fire, zoning, or licensing.
Okay, thank you. Because I did not think about parking spaces. I just heard the change for the fires, the water sprinkler system, but I didn't think about the parking spaces to the facility.
And that was Texas. Every state's a little different, but I will say,
Okay.
Whether it's a parking issue or whether the fire department or the fire marshal limits the capacity of the space, you might have zoning say under this approved use you can have this many people. You might have the fire department say under this use, no, you can only have this many people. And then you might go to licensing and they're like, well, you can have this many people, and so like even understanding some of those components are important, because the number of bathrooms you have might limit the number of people you can have in the space. The fire marshal might limit your capacity based on the number of exterior doors and egress ingress that you might have. So there's all these things to take into consideration when choosing a space, whether you're leasing or buying.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, thank you, Sabrina. Thanks for being on the call. I'm going to go on to, I think, Anita.
Yes. Like we said, we are at the very beginning and we wanted to know what the initial step was. But we have another question after this, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so we'll try to get through it in 5 to 7 minutes, and if we're running a little late, we'll go on to the next person. But so to start out, you kind of just, your question is just kind of where to start, right? Is that what you're?
Yes.
Yeah. So my thing is, like, at this point in time, Anita, are you like do you have a certain dollar amount as far as funds that you've set aside to start this project?
Well, we do, but now it's very interesting, the question that somebody asked whether to do a not for profit or a for profit. So we do have money, but we don't know which one will be beneficial yet, whether it will be for profit or not for profit.
Anita, do you have a vision for the, like, if you were like, hey, on my wish list, I want a center that can accommodate 50 people that can do this, this, and this. Like, is there any sort of, do you have any sort of like,
well, we were
vision for what that?
Yes, we were thinking about between 30 and 40.
Okay, got it.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. So, it's a good starting place if you can pick like a size, because then you can start backing into, other things. So, like, I always say that, the first place to start, though, no matter what, just to make sure that you're clear on your vision for what you want your adult day center to be is again, do you want your consumer, your average customer that's coming through your door, are you focusing and catering to your private pay marketplace or your state funded programs? So just meaning that, when you think about your advertising, when you think about who you're marketing to, are you catering, to those that are on, say Medicaid or VA, or do you envision this being more of a private pay center? Second thing is, are you going to be senior focused? And if so, like, there's components to that, like dementia, Alzheimer's, and Parkinson's, that's going to need to be a focus area of yours. Or is it going to be catering to more young adult? The other one, more, are you going to cater more towards a medical model, where you're, maybe you're assisting with medication management? Are you going to have PTOT, whether you bring your own therapist in or you contract out through a third party? Do you plan to have more of a medical model, or are you planning to be more of a social model? And then that last component is, nonprofit or for profit. But once you identify, once you understand your identity, your adult day center's identity, and you understand the size, then we can start working back into like next steps. And then of course, like Christina and I always encourage everyone to reach out to your association, join your association, start networking amongst other members that are a part of that association. If your state has a good association, just to start acclimating yourself to what different centers are doing, the size of different centers, understanding, maybe what reimbursement rates might be in your area for Medicaid if you're planning to go that route. Christina, I'm just kind of like going through my typical, spiel here, but I'm sure you could clean it up a little bit and provide a better 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
I'm sorry. I was replying to somebody, so I kind of missed part of that question.
No, you're good. So Anita is just kind of like next steps. I was saying like identifying the type of center you want to open, knowing the size, and then starting to network with your associations,
right.
And stuff like that. But I think, I would say typically, Anita, like once I know, like I'm just to give you an example, I had no idea what the space was about. We reached out to our Florida Adult Day Services Association. I went and toured 7 different adult day centers in the state of Florida, down in Fort Myers, up in Tampa, up to Tallahassee. Got a wide range of visuals from some private pay adult day centers, some Medicaid funded adult day centers, some in more rural areas, some in more, densely populated areas. And that kind of gave me like a general understanding of what I wanted to do for myself. I went to the National Adult Day Services Association conference, started plugging in, there, and then started navigating my way through the process. But once you kind of have an idea of what you want and the size of space that you want, then really the next step is starting to pencil out how much money are you going to need? Are you going to lease a space, purchase a building? What are the licensing requirements in your state? If you have gone through all that and you have good understanding, and now you're at a point where you're like, okay, next steps, we know how much this is going to cost. We think, we've done a financial pro forma, and now it's about leasing or purchasing a building. Then at that point in time, the number one most critical thing you got to do is make sure that whatever building you're looking at, whether you're leasing it or purchasing it, is that building has an approved use where the zoning would allow you to operate an adult day center there.
Okay.
And you would want to make sure that you get clarification on that before you ever purchase or sign a lease.
Okay.
One other thing I'll add to that, Kris, is I always encourage people as well to check with your Medicaid managed care provider, insurance companies within your area. Some of the states are now not taking any new adult day providers. New Jersey is specifically one that has very limited availability for new adult day providers. I know I have a client in the LA area, and one of the managed care plans that we reached out to said right now they don't have a need for any new adult day providers. So you could go through all of this, and if you're basing your business plan on a certain percentage of Medicaid and you can't get in networks, you're going to have a very difficult time meeting those financial projections, and you're going to be looking at more of a private pay model. So just understanding that part is also key.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, Anita. And then we'll move on to Bob the Builder.
I'm here.
All right, Bob.
Bob the Builder, I'm here. So I have a building in Philadelphia that I'm thinking of repurposing for adult day health. It is zoned specifically inclusive of ADH. And I think ability to put in sprinklers if I had to. But my problem is I own a business. I'm remote. I live in Puerto Rico, buildings in Philadelphia. So ideally, I'd like to find someone to either partner with or a good operator to either partner with or just lease the space to. Funding's not so much of an issue for me. I have that, but I don't have the time. So I'm just curious, like, is there a way to find like a good operator who would be interested in partnering up, or is there, you know, or maybe it's just engaging consultants like yourselves and just opening up myself? I don't know.
Christina, do you know anyone in that Philadelphia market?
I'm trying to think. I do not, but you know that you could reach out to the National Association, and they may be able to direct you. You know, sometimes you get people that are I may get somebody who's looking to start, but maybe they don't have the financial ability to do it. So if I had somebody in that area, that would be a perfect marriage for you. With someone like that, but
because I think Christina, Philadelphia reimbursement rates are decent, right?
Yes, they're better than Texas.
Yeah, I think everything's better in Texas. I'm like,
Yeah,
I still can't believe
Texas.
it's.
I mean, I would honestly only work with someone who's a proven performer. I'd rather do it myself than I wouldn't work with someone new because it's too uncertain.
So Bob, I would think that probably like if because honestly that's the hardest part about this whole thing, because the adult day industry doesn't have a lot of, if you think about it, the industry itself, they say there's about 5,000 adult day centers, and if there's only 5,000 adult day centers in the entire U.S., how many of those are in a church on Tuesdays and Thursdays for 4 hours? How many of those are part of big nonprofit organizations, and it's a subsection of their larger umbrella? So you kind of narrow it down to like, true either entrepreneurs or owner operators who have successfully opened. Because one thing I will tell you is when we went from one location to two locations, that change, the one operated amazing. The second one showed us all of our, all the little like chinks in our armor of, things that, we thought we had really well dialed in, but the team in Port Charlotte really like kind of was masking maybe some of those trainings or materials. So long story short, I think, being able to, talk to someone, at NADSA who maybe knows other operators in the Philadelphia market that has at least two centers, and has proven their ability to run two different centers successfully, I think would be a great starting point to have a conversation if you choose to partner with someone who has experience. But I think I don't know if Bob the Builder left, or I saw he disappeared from my screen, so I don't know if he's still here or not.
Yeah, he may have dropped. The other thing I was thinking, Kris, like even like some of the franchises like SarahCare, they may have someone looking, to open a center in that area, and maybe his space would be perfect for that.
Yeah, because I mean, that could be a great relationship too, where you got, a franchisor moving into a certain market that maybe has systems in place that is going to help support that franchisee, and he can be a partner in it, alongside someone. So, and they might be able to help find that person. Bob, I'm not sure if you were able to hear all that stuff. I know I wanted to at least get it out there, because then, this is a recorded call, so at least you can look back and watch it. But I think it's a great question, and I definitely think
right in the middle of all the great. Thanks for the advice. And I did manage to drop off. The internet kicked my rear end out about 3/4 of the way through your answer. And I do think the ideas you're giving are great. And I'm just wondering if one of you guys can stick your info, maybe I can engage you to help out with this. Because for me, like I said, I own a business. I'm an entrepreneur and I'm capable, but my tendency is more to hire people who really know what they're doing and just work with them and get it off smoothly. I'm not at the stage where I have the time in my life to do too much of a do-it-yourselfer. But it sounds like this is a business ripe for roll-ups and expansion. There's a lot of smaller operators and a great opportunity for even new people to come in.
Yeah, and I would imagine that area is going to have, like if we went to NADSA and figured out who's in that area, who's in that market, you're going to find some experienced operators in that market. It's a big enough market, and the state reimbursements, like is at a price point that makes sense, that particular market is going to have other operators that you probably could partner with. And Christina's idea about the franchises, being able to work with a SarahCare or an Elderwell or a Town Square, maybe where they can help support, an operator, and you might be able to be a part of that. But there'll be like the reassurance of, a franchisor that has an invested interest in its success too. So, all these are
Yeah, I
great
love that.
ideas and a great kind of place to start. So great question.
That's wonderful advice. And I owned a franchise in the past and absolutely loved it. I think it was one of my best businesses. So thank you so much. And you're doing a great job on the call. Thank you.
Absolutely. Hey, thanks for being here, Bob. Appreciate it. And Miss Nancy, we're gonna move on to you and then try to get through to Nicole and keep this party going.
Okay.
So Nancy, give us your question real quick. We'll we got about 5 minutes, and then we'll try to get you as much information as we can.
Okay. The first question, the one that is the least not least important, but least lengthy. If I visit because I was listening to you saying that you need to visit several adult daycare centers, things like that. If I visit them, should I tell them my plan to have one have a adult daycare center?
I mean, my immediate response is always like, just go and being honest. I feel like anytime you are pretending to be someone you're not, just to look, I feel like, like you may not get all the information you want to get from that conversation, and you may not be able to have an honest conversation about what it takes to run an adult day center, or the intricacies of what makes maybe them successful. So if you're doing that, it may be good to like stray away from your backyard. You may not want to go to your neighbor and be like, hey, I'm opening next door and love to understand your trade secrets and stuff like that. But if you go out of town to a neighboring city or whatnot, I think just going and being honest, hey, I'm opening up an adult day center. It's about 20, 30 miles away from here. So, I don't know, it's, it shouldn't, we're not competing with each other, but, we'd love to learn more about what you're doing. And, and you're just kind of building rapport with people and building friendships. And some people are going to shut the door, and some people are going to, be more open-minded. And, I remember one lady, I went in there and she was like, no, sorry, I don't have time today. And we just started talking a little bit. Next thing you know, like it went from I don't have time today to I was there for 3 hours,
Okay.
So, but I think it's a great way to like just, because everyone's going to have a different take on it, a different way they operate, a different understanding of the business, a different focus. And I think it's a great way to just kind of start wrapping your head around all the different options. Anytime I go to a NADSA conference, I always go on the site visits because I love to see all the different operators and how they run and what they look like, and so it's a great experience.
Okay. Yeah. My second question is, I am in the process to get a small loan from the Chamber of Commerce from the area where I live. And but in the meantime, they said they will work with me. They work with the lowest credit score. But in the meantime, I do have some high debit card debt. So I'd like to know if I have to like consolidate this debt before I started the process of filling the application for the small loan from the Chamber of Commerce.
I have some thoughts. I mean, Christina, do you have any expertise on the credit card? Because I think the credit card debt thing might take a little time, but.
Right. So, credit card debt, anybody in financial services is going to tell you to pay that off first. Pay off your highest, high interest ones first, or if you can consolidate them all into one payment, you're going to need to do that because, they're going to look at your debt to income ratio. They're going to see your credit history, like, if you're only making the minimum payments, and so it may be harder to get financing when you have a lot of outstanding debt. So, you definitely want to take care of that debt first.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. That makes sense.
And I'll be honest, when you start a center, anytime you start a small business like that, you're often the last person paid, right? So you got to make sure that financially you're solid, that you can go a month, 2 months, 3 months without taking a paycheck. Census drops because you could have 20 people today, and then tomorrow 3 or 4 of them aren't coming back, you know, for all kinds of various reasons. So, you know, you need to have those cash reserves built up for those type of things that happen.
Okay, thank you very much.
And you know, this is gonna take a special person, but my favorite hack out of all of them is purchasing an existing adult day center. Like, so if you're going to if you're in, like, so the hard part is, like, so when I think about what we're building, you know, we're private pay focused, very unique you know, aesthetics on the inside. You know, it's hard to replicate. Like, we're starting something and kind of building something from scratch. But if something like this already existed, I would love the opportunity to purchase an existing business that, you're like, essentially what's cool about this too is a lot of times, if you were going to purchase an existing adult day center, you can get debt on that adult day center that's not necessarily dependent on you personally, because the debt would be dependent on the performance of the business itself. And then instead of you having to go through the heartache of, trying to lease a space, buy a building, having all these carrying costs while you're going through licensing, and then this problem arises, this thing comes up, you go to launch and they're like, oh, sorry, Medicaid's closed, try again next year, and then you're having to focus on private pay and all these things that could come up. If you purchase an existing adult day center, you're going into it, and through the acquisition, you're getting a license, you're getting your Medicaid reimbursement, you're getting a business that already has cash flow, you're probably getting an owner that's going to be willing to stay on for a certain period of time to help with the transition, that already knows the ins and outs. And so you get to buy this business and essentially use the business to get the loan to purchase it, because it would be based on the business's success itself. And then you're getting kind of this built-in training through the existing staff and the existing owner that could stay on. So it takes a certain kind of person to put that deal together, because you might have to get creative on whether or not the owner is willing to self-finance maybe the down payment, that would be required by the loan. So there's some things to take into consideration there. Plus, you might be buying a business maybe that's not exactly what you wanted, but you got to know that you're buying something that you'll turn into maybe what you want someday. So you might have to take some of those kind of initial sacrifices where you're like, man, the space is it's not pretty, and it's not exactly what I was thinking, but it's an opportunity. It's a way to get into the industry.
Yeah, but it's not easy to get a business that is already like wanting. You see what I'm saying? If it's something that is easier to find, I would rather go that way instead of starting from scratch. But it's it's not something easy to find exactly where I live right now.
Well, and the hard part too is you may not necessarily find it for sale online. You might have to go knock on some doors, and that owner may not even know they wanted to sell yet. But sometimes it's just knocking on those doors, having those conversations as you're touring places, getting a feel for how long has this person been in the business. Is this someone that might be willing to sell their business? But it's again, Nancy, this may not be the right answer for you, but I just wanted to because of the other question you were asking when it came to getting a loan, I just, I thought it was a good opportunity to share this option for others too. But I think, in your specific case, anytime you can pay off the credit card debt, it's going to be much easier to get a loan. If you're starting from scratch, so much of that initial loan, whether it's through the SBA or something else, is going to depend on your own personal finances, or your previous experiences. So, but these are great questions, Nancy. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I have another question. I started with that. It's gonna be really very, very, very quick. So I fill out the application for the myself, which is for Massachusetts, the Medicare, and then they responded me really quick, but they said you forgot to put the license for the adult daycare license, and I don't have the license yet. So what should I tell them?
Yeah. You said Medicare or Medicaid?
Medicare.
Yeah,
It's
because I mean, because
myself is Medicare. Yeah.
Because Medicare doesn't pay for adult day.
So whatever pay for it anyway. So myself is both of them, Medicare and Medicaid.
Yeah. So Medicaid will pay for adult day services, and some people might be duly enrolled in both Medicare and Medicaid, but you as a provider would actually be billing, either Medicaid directly through the state or Medicaid through a MCO, a managed care organization. But you're not going to be able to really apply for any of that stuff until you have a license anyway. So, you could just tell them you don't have a license yet, but
yeah, because when I called them, they said, yes, you're gonna need us to run your adult daycare. So you said this is where you should go to fill out the application, and I did it right away, and I sent the application back to them, and they told me I need the adult daycare license before they can even start the application, the application.
Yeah. So you have to get the adult day license first, and then you can go reapply.
Okay. So I need to have the license. Tell them that okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. And Nicole, we made it to you, girl.
All right. So yeah, pretty much like I said, I'm working on finding a location, getting a loan, doing some marketing, but like I'm kind of like, okay, now then what? Like I'm kind of like stuck in this like weird, I don't know really what to do next.
Yes, so I would say, like, when you think about your vision for the space, do you have a general idea of what size you want to open?
Yeah, so like ideally around like 3,000 square feet.
Okay.
So I mean, I guess one thing I need to know is like how many people can fit into that space.
Christina, do you know the New York regs for
the square footage requirements for New York? No, not off the top of my head. But you can estimate anywhere between 45 and 60. So and you have to look at the net square footage. So even though you have a 3,000 square foot space, you have to exclude bathrooms, offices, kitchen from that count. So you may end up with a net square footage of 2,000, right?
Okay.
So, and then you would just divide that, so if it's 50 square feet, it gives us what, 40 people? Which I think is kind of tight, 40 people in 2,000 square feet, but it's doable.
And Nicole, just to give you some perspective, we have our first location was 200 square feet. We're licensed for 60 people. At 45 members, we're pretty full. It's a little tight. Because you got 45 members, you got your staff, you got walkers, wheelchairs, furniture. We have 3 bathrooms in that location. We have a hair and nail salon, a resting area, which is a separate room, an admin office, and then a kitchen. So our net usable space is, just I think shy of 2,000 square feet. When you have 40 plus people in there, it's a very busy place. But it's certainly doable. I think it's a great starting size for sure. And I think really when you think about next steps, at least you have a general idea of what size you want to shoot for. You've been going to the associations, you're plugging into the community, which is great. And really it's probably going to come down to starting to look at spaces, getting an idea of like what you can lease a 3,000 square foot space for in that area. Like I just did some rough math, and if like market rates there were similar to Florida, it looks like your potential rental expense might be around $6,200 a month. And so you're looking at like probably 75-ish thousand a year. Again, your market might have a like when you think of most places you're going to lease, they're going to have a dollar per square foot. In Florida, it's around 25, or the area that I'm in is about $25 a square foot. So it's one of those things where you might in your market be closer to 15 or 18 or 20, or you might go to a
similar.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I look at one space and it was like 8,000 a month.
Okay. Yep. And So I think like, that's your biggest fixed cost and your biggest carrying costs when you're initially going into this process, right? So, getting an idea of what that might cost, what that is and what it might cost over the course of a year or 2 years. Because you're gonna have this carrying cost because you're gonna have some build out and some construction. You're gonna have the licensing component. You're going through, like these various steps which might delay or cause some hiccups along the way. So I think just being mindful of like when you go into a space, making sure you got the right location. Like, are you in an area where you can that has the right density that can truly serve a population where your average daily attendance is 40 to 45 people a day. And then I think the next thing too is like making sure that you have a good understanding of like how to ask, and you could use the help of a realtor too to help you find these spaces, but make sure you're asking for either rent abatement, where maybe they're willing to give you 6 months free rent. Maybe it's got an escalating rent, where there's like 6 months free and then it escalates up to whatever your full rental amount is. And if they don't want to give you that, maybe you can get some credits for tenant improvement allowances, which they might give you 50 grand or $100,000 towards construction costs. And having someone maybe help you negotiate some of those things. These are the things to be mindful of. But I think overall, I don't know if you've seen the video, Nicole, I put on, like, I think I made a video on the cost of starting an adult day center that's between like 3,000 and 6,000 square feet or something like that.
I have, but I will watch it again.
Yeah, so I think just take that and times it by 2 to give you a conservative, like I would take it like, times it by 1.5 to 2 to give you kind of a conservative like estimate of like, if I had this much money, I know we're going to be okay. Like we're going to be able to make it through this. And then that way you can at that point in time either start figuring out, do I need a partner? Am I going to cash out part of my 401k? Do I need to go get a line of credit on my house? And how much can I get, with an SBA loan? So you can start kind of figuring out what all your, ways, how you pool this money together so you can insulate yourself, from getting too far down the road and then being like, oh my gosh, we're out of money. Like we got this far, but I spent my life savings to get this far, And
yeah, I'm in like a few weeks, I'm actually going to be at a senior conference, kind of like in like a biggish area. It's going to have like it's like 2,000 seniors, and I got a booth, and I got banners, and I'm just like, okay, maybe this was too soon, but I feel like the next one's going to be next year, and I want people in my area, even though I don't have my exact location, I want people like in my county to know that I'm coming. So
yeah, I think building that network, collecting cards, building your email list, all that stuff you can do at this stage. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I've been meeting with other like owners and just kind of like getting myself and my name out there.
Nicole, when you think about your space, are you kind of focusing on the private pay side or the more Medicaid? Yeah, private pay.
I'll be right back.
So I like, hold on a second. Okay. So I think, Christina, any other tips? I know I kind of, it's hard when you're first starting out because there's so many decisions to make, and I feel like probably the number one reason why people get kind of in this decision fatigue is because they don't really know how to spend their money yet, because like they don't know how much it's going to cost. And so it's hard to commit to leases and construction and to carrying costs or some of these big fixed expenses when you don't really know how much is this project going to cost me, And so I think sometimes it's hard because you can get into this kind of position where you're like, it's hard to know, okay, what do I act on? Because I'm like, I'm trying to figure it out, but I can't go lease a space tomorrow because I don't even know what this is going to entail, So, I don't know, Christina, I'm kind of like all over the place, but any
I
light you
agree.
can
You need to have a business plan and just figuring out like what those expenses are going to be. A lot of my clients, even if they don't have a business plan when we start, I always tell them you're going to need one for any type of financing. So, I work with them on, the business plan. The SBA's website, has an outline for you to be able to do a business plan. And then just figuring out what those added costs may be that is specific to your industry, so I think that's going to, the business plan will really give you a good idea, because you'll be looking at square footage, how many people you can have per day, what's the most money you're going to make, right? So if you can only have 20 people a day, and you're getting $38 in Texas a day, and you're paying $5,000 a month for rent and all the other overhead costs, is that really worth it? So,
Yeah.
and that'll help answer that question.
And I think too, like, when you're kind of, deciding, like, does it make sense for me to have a partner in this? Do I want a partner in this? Or do I want to go solo? And if I go solo, then, your most likely chance of getting a loan that's going to help you with the adult day side of things is going to be an SBA 7A loan. And it's going to be very rare that you come across like conventional financing just through a regular bank without the backing of the SBA that's going to be willing to finance, an adult day center concept, just simply because there's not enough adult day center. There's not enough that have existed to build for banks to have this track record of like, okay, yeah, this is like a mature industry. We're willing to go loan in it. So your SBA, what's going to happen too is you're going to have banks that do SBA loans, but they don't necessarily, they may not focus on healthcare, or they may only focus on fast, casual dining, so you're still, even when you go through this kind of, like, if you're going to go the SBA 7A loan route, you're still gonna have to interview different banks, to see, which of these banks that do SBA loans will do something in the space that I'm looking to get a loan in this adult day space.
Yeah, I have like an application out, and then like I was matched with some lenders, and so I'm working on like a pitch deck, and so I'm in everything.
I think the best place to always start, I feel like, is like, being able to kind of forecast the financial side of it and then back down from that, because the overall cost of the project, and that one video where I break down that kind of, I don't know if it was 2,000 to 4,000 square feet, but it was around a 3,000 square foot space. That's a great, like, kind of base level understanding of what to expect when it comes to costs. But at least you can say, hey, on the high side, I'll be here. So let me back down into that and see, like, is this achievable for me to raise this amount of capital to pull this off? And if you're so far off that you're like, all right, I'm not there yet, then maybe your parameters for the size of space that you want to open go from 3,000 to 1,500 square feet. Instead of you having a team, where you have an administrator and a full team and you're the owner, maybe you're like, I'm going to have to take a, more of an active role. And for the next, 3 to 5 years, I'm going to be on the floor with my team, a part of the activities and the operations and, running the show. But that 1,500 square foot space might be a lower risk tolerance, allows me to get my feet wet in the industry and kind of figure out how to navigate it. And then as I grow, then we can go find another space and then grow into that larger 3,000 square foot space,
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So glad you were joined us today. It's fantastic. So I don't know, Christina, do you have time for maybe just one last question? And then
Yeah, because I'm dying to find out this. Is it Daniel from LA? Is talking about buying an existing center. So I have to tell you this, because I had a client in LA that someone is selling a center there, and they want $1.2 million for this center. And we were talking about it. Come to find out, licenses expired, all kinds of issues, no assets, just the license alone. And I was like, I told her, run. So it is good to buy existing centers, but you really got to do some due diligence when you look at that. So Dan, go ahead if that kind of answered your question or not.
Is it Daniel or Danielle?
I think it's Daniel.
Okay. Is he on here, Daniel?
Let me see, Daniel.
I was just looking through the list to see if he's on. I don't think he's on.
Off. Yeah,
he must have fell off.
Okay. So anyways, yeah. So make sure if you're looking at existing centers, check that licensure. to make sure that it's not expired. And
because when you're buying a center, I mean, that's probably one of the most, even if census is not great and maybe the team's falling apart, but at least if they had a license, at least there's some value in that. Or if they have MC, contracts, like there's some value in that,
Right. Yeah, he had nothing. So no
Jeez,
client, no
crazy.
participants, nothing. So
Jeez.
anyways, all right.
Well, who I guess we should just do first one to blurt out their question, and then
we're gonna call it a day. I tried to answer as many of these in the chats. Real quick though, Kris, I want to let people know because there were some questions about your videos, and Kris does have a YouTube channel. So a lot of times when he's talking about his videos, if you just Google his name, you're going to see a slew of videos that he's done, and they're very informative. NADSA. Oh, go ahead.
And I was gonna say too. And if you go to like my actual channel and you click on the the homepage, there's a series of playlists. So because sometimes when you're searching YouTube, you may not get all the content, right? And I think we've put 400 videos out there on Adult Day. So, but you could search by playlist. So if you had questions on financials or operations and licensing or marketing or all those different things, they're all broken out by playlist. So if you were looking for something specific. So I just wanted to put that out there. But thanks, Christina.
Yeah. And then also I put on here, somebody had asked about NADSA, but there's, NADSA is a great resource. And they also have an annual conference, which I put a link to it in the chat. So it's October this year in Chicago. The previous years we've had it in Chicago. It's a great turnout, a great networking event. So if you want to click on that and check it out, I did put my contact information in there. I do consulting all over, and my website's on there. You can always book a session just for, like a 15-minute chat with me. If your question didn't get answered here, you can, maybe we could schedule something for that, or you can pop on next month and be at the top of the chat box.
I know. It's funny. All the questions start coming in. It always takes
right at the end, right?
I know. So,
okay.
I don't know if anyone else, if someone has, we'll give one last chance. If you have a question, raise your hand or just blur it out, unmute your mic, and we'll give one more person 5 minutes. Anyone?
Hello,
Any
Kris.
takers?
Yes, this is me, Sabrina.
Hi, Sabrina. Okay.
I want to piggyback off of Miss Nancy, what she had mentioned, because I went through that for the loan. It's best to probably to get a personal loan to pay off your high interest cards, your high interest cards you have. Because when I did it, it took me a month, and now I'm at my credit score and I'm ready. It's at 745.
Good job.
Oh, fantastic.
And that was
awesome.
within a month time. So when it came back again to update, it was updated enough on them that I was good to go for the business loans. Because I was at the low 6 at that time, but with that high utilization with your credit cards, that was like a hinder, like you wasn't going to clear but a little bit, about 10, but you want to go higher, so you could do that.
Oh, great advice there, Sabrina. That's fantastic.
Okay, you're welcome, honey. Thank you.
Thank you. And just for everyone, Christina, I don't know if you want to share real quickly about things that you might be able to help people with, and whether it's on the consulting side or operations manuals. Just touch base with that, real quick, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah. So I help people from the basic startup of, looking at your location to, guiding you through your business plan, all that fun stuff, marketing, but also policies and procedures. And, people don't realize what an undertaking that is. So I do have a customized policy and procedure manual that can be done to your business in your state, or a template manual as well. So, and that's at adsconsult.biz.
Yep. So, and just for those, that may not know, I'm not as in depth or as involved as, like, say, Christina is at holding your hand, going through the entire process from start to finish, and helping out with the policies and procedures. In fact, Christina is always my go-to for those kinds of questions or needs that people might have. But if you had questions, you want to dive deeper into a specific issue that you're going through, I do a lot of like one-on-one coaching. It's like a 1 hour session. You can book one, get your answer you need. We can talk through your specific issue on a Zoom format, and it's all about you in that conversation. And there's different packages. You can buy like a single one, a double, or a triple bundle and save money that way. For those that are interested in that, between now and the end of April, we have a special where it's $100 off for any of those one-on-one coaching calls. So feel free to go to adcpro.com/coach. And you can book a coaching call right through there. Use the, I think, promo code. It's April 25, and you'll save $100 on that coaching call. But it's not consulting. It's not holding your hand through the entire length of starting up and opening your center, or going through and building policies and procedures and operations manuals. Christina is definitely your girl for that. So if you have any specific information where you're looking for like demographic information, market analysis for that specific location, you're like, hey, I got this location in mind, but before I pull the trigger and sign a lease, I want to make sure that the size is the right size for my market. We do have different packages if you would like to get a full market analysis, where we can provide recommendations for the size of center that you should open based on the density. And it's a full report, and it'll kind of help you understand if your market's more favorable towards those on Medicaid or those maybe more on private pay. So you can find all that stuff at adcpro.com. We, Christina and I, will be doing this on the second Wednesday of every month from 6:30 to 7:30. I believe next month we have a special guest, right, Christina? You want to share real quick about that?
Yeah, so he was actually on this call tonight. His name's
fantastic.
Seth Walker, and Seth has a ton of experience in the IDD world. So those of you who are looking at that population for your center or know someone who may be doing that, he'll be available next week to answer a lot of questions, or next month, I'm sorry, to answer a lot of questions about that. So I'm excited about that.
Absolutely. So yeah, we'll make sure to you share that information too via email and through text, just to remind everyone that we'll have a little bit more of a more specific focus, a different niche, which I think will be very helpful for those that are entering into that side of the adult day space. So looking forward to having Seth on next month in May. So the second Wednesday of May, we'll get together again. But thank you so much for joining this call, everybody. We appreciate you all being here, and we look forward to seeing you next month.
All right.
And thank
Bye,
you,
everyone.
Christina. You all have a wonderful week, a wonderful month, and happy Easter.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks,
Wonderful job.
Chris.
Thanks for
Thank
the
you.
sharing.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Thank you both.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Appreciate you guys being here. You guys have a great evening.